Hey guys, this video is going to be a bit different from the things I normally make, but I thought it was an important topic to talk about, so I hope you'll listen anyway. There seems to be a lot of confusion about criticism online, and I wanted to make a little video that introduces criticism as a concept. Now, for context, I have a degree in illustration and creative writing, so I have a lot of experience critiquing and being critiqued. And I think a lot of the confusion I'm seeing boils down to a misunderstanding about two different kinds of critiques. So to start, let's get some definitions out of the way. The word criticism, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is 1. The act of criticizing, to consider the merits and demerits of and judge accordingly, or to find faults with / point out the faults of, usually unfavorably. Or 2. The art of evaluating or analyzing works of art or literature. This is where we get our two different types of critiques, which, for clarity's sake, I'm going to call technical critique and media critique. Technical critique will be aligned with the first definition, about finding faults, while media critique will align itself with the second definition, about analysis. Now that we've got some terms defined, let's get into the meat and potatoes. Part 1. What is a technical critique? A technical critique is typically aligned with what we would call constructive criticism. It is critique with the intent to improve something. How this is done is by pointing out and acknowledging the flaws in a work of art in order to fix them, or to prevent them from happening in future projects. Technical critique is an extremely important part of being an artist, and is about 30 to 70% of what you'll be doing in any creative workshop, from writing to painting to sculpting. The goal of a technical critique is not to push the artist to change their art to suit your own personal tastes, but instead to help the artist strengthen their own artistic abilities. In a critique, you have to take into consideration what the artist was trying to do. So for example, if I were trying to paint a realistic image of a banana, you could comment that the lighting in the painting is painted in such a way that it doesn't feel realistic. A technical critique also often involves suggesting fixes to issues brought up. So if my banana painting isn't working, a critic might say, "Hey, I think you're not giving enough attention to the reflected light on the bottom of the banana, and that's why it's not looking as realistic as you want." A technical critique can be done at any stage in a project, and this stage really dictates what kind of feedback you will be giving or receiving. An in-progress critique is mostly about preventing or correcting errors before they are made, or before they can't be fixed, while a post-completion critique gives the artist feedback to use on future projects. And it's not just about the person being critiqued either. By giving a critique, you can also recognize issues in your own art and how to solve them. Now that we know what a technical critique is, we're going to take a look at this little comic I drew and give it a technical critique. If I were to critique this comic, I might say, while I think it's a cute comic, I think the artist could have spent a little bit more time on the frog. Since it's the main element of the story, I feel more care could have gone into drawing it and making it more frog-like. Maybe look at images of frogs online so that you have a better idea about their anatomy. Another thing I might do when giving technical critique is suggesting resources and reading materials about the medium. For example, I might say, "Hey, if you're interested in making comics, you should check out Scott McCloud's books Understanding Comics and Making Comics, because they give a good overview of comic techniques and your work might benefit from it." Let's say this is a comic from a famous comic artist, and I'm posting this critique online. By doing so, my goal is less for the creator to see it, but instead so that anyone who may be reading can learn and improve their own works based on the techniques I point out in the comic. Part 2. What is media criticism? Media criticism, on the other hand, is an attempt to understand a work of art through close observation. It's often a much more in-depth exploration and tends to be less about making a work better and more about what the art is trying to do or say. Because of this, media criticism is even more subjective than technical critique. For example, if I read a short story about a caterpillar who is afraid of becoming a butterfly, I could say, "This story is a metaphor for being afraid of change," while someone else might say, "It's a story about queer identity." Neither reading would necessarily be wrong or right, because it's up to each individual to interpret the art. Media criticism can also be about finding patterns in an artist's work and recognizing the media that they are referencing. Maybe the caterpillar story is by someone who really likes A Bug's Life or The Metamorphosis, and maybe the artist often writes stories about insects. These influences can change the way we might think about and look at this caterpillar story. Media criticism is also important so that we can recognize the way a story might affect us. Fictional works that are uncritically or unintentionally racist, transphobic, or homophobic can have an effect on the way society treats people. Being able to analyze and think about what a story is saying can help us to recognize those themes and prevent us from holding those ideas ourselves. Now, let's take a look at that same frog comic from before and do a little media criticism. So in here, what I might say is, In this story, an individual wants to see a frog and points to a creature that does not appear to be really a frog. The person seems convinced that it is a frog because they want to see a frog so badly that they are willing to lie to themselves about it. Based on the text, I believe this story is about how sometimes we want something so badly we will convince ourselves of things that are not true. I could also suggest things the comic might be referencing to help build up my argument about the frog not being a real frog. Maybe I suggest it's referencing Plato's allegory of the cave. Part 3. How it comes together. Now, there is an issue with both of the critiques I've made about this little comic. I'm not really considering the artist's intent. When I give my technical critique about the frog for not looking like a frog, I don't know if the author wants it to be a frog or not. When I give my media critique, I'm not considering what the artist has to say about their story and what the frog means. An artist does not always get the last say over what a work of art means. Once it's been released, it's up to each individual to decide what it means to them. But it's still important to think about and explore what the author was intending to do, especially when we are critiquing with the intent to better a work. If I were to look at a mid-2000s anime, I can't critique that in the same way I would critique a neo-impressionist painting of a woman crying. Those are different kinds of works with different artists' intentions. If I were going to critique the neo-impressionist painting, I might say, this artist is known for their paintings of powerful emotions, but this work is lacking in some of the same emotional impact as their other work. The woman's expression is too soft to really get across the same emotional depth. So a part of a good technical critique should also be recognizing the styles, references, and process of the artist. Similarly, if I were going to do a media critique, I should acknowledge where the work has failed to meet its own intents. If we are critiquing a work by someone that we know, the easiest way to do this is to simply ask them what their intent was with their piece. Once you know, you can give feedback based around their need for the work. If you are giving a critique for a work of art by someone we don't know, we can look into articles or interviews when the artist talks about their intentions. So let's go one last time to the Frog comic and give a combined technical and media critique. What I read from this comic is a story about a person who is seeing a thing that isn't a frog, but thinks that it is. If that's the artist's intention, then it's working to get the story across. However, it's unclear what the artist intended, and this ambiguity is making the narrative fall flat. We have to do some interpreting of the work in order to give it the best critique possible. Part 4. Dunking. A lot of people hear the word criticism and often assume it's just about saying, this thing bad, when criticism is a process of understanding art and working to better it. That doesn't mean we can't talk about aspects of art that can be harmful. We should absolutely talk about that. But it also doesn't mean that the only way to engage with a work of art is to be negative. When the only way people think that they can engage with art is negative, they often engage in what I call dunking. There's probably an actual word for it, but I just like to call it dunking, or dunking on things. Dunking is the act of making negative critiques for entertainment or out of hatred or for someone or something, often for entertainment or humor. It's not to be confused with genuine criticism for the mistakes of an artist has made or problematic or harmful elements of a work, but can often go hand in hand with genuine criticism. If you want to see an example of dunking that is also genuine media and technical criticism, look to H. Bomber Guy's Blank is Garbage and Here's Why videos. He not only explains his issues with the media, but he also gives feedback for any creators who might be watching on what the text is saying and why it isn't working, as well as how the works could have been improved. While the creators of the work he is criticizing are probably not watching, it's still helpful for other smaller creators to learn from what he is saying. I don't think dunking is necessarily a very helpful way to criticize art. It can definitely be fun if you're frustrated or dislike something. I've got some videos planned where I dunk on a rather baffling reading of one of Kafka's stories, but it often slips from honest and good-intentioned critique into just straight-up hating something, loudly nitpicking it, and calling for other people to hate it too. If you want to see a video that covers this topic more in depth, I would recommend Sarah Z's video, Bad Media Criticism. She does a very good job of explaining the issues there, and I'll try to put that in the description, that's it. Art is a form of communication. All art is trying to say something, even if it's intentionally open to interpretation, or if the artist's intent was to not say anything at all. It's important to be able to recognize how we engage with art. Media critique and technical critique have a lot of overlap, but it's still helpful to be able to recognize their differences and similarities, as well as when it's best to use one or the other, or both. Criticism in all forms is a way of understanding ourselves and the art we engage with. Anyway, I hope this video helps someone. I know it's a little bit more high school than my last video, and I'm going to be making more critical stuff, but I felt like it was an important topic to explain. If you like this sort of educational video, let me know. I can put together some more videos about art and writing theory. I got this degree, I might as well share the knowledge. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll have another video out in a few weeks or so. If you want early access to my videos and comics, you can find them on my Patreon. Which, by the way, my comic, House and Home, which is a horror comic anthology, is now available on Webtoons, so I'll put a link to that down there as well, and you can read the next issue of it on my Patreon already. So, yeah, I hope you have a good day. Thanks for watching. Also, I would love to hear what you guys think of the frog comic. Practice your media criticism on my silly comic about a frog. Go for it. I want to hear your thoughts.